Kia ora tatou. We've got Steve Evans from Families for Justice with us today. Oh, tēnā koe, Steve. How are you?
Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas.
Steve, just wanted to ask you, what's your personal opinion of the investigations that are going on currently?
Well, they're exceedingly well overdue. People have been complaining for 30 or 40 years. Maori have been complaining for a long time, particularly around the Oranga Tamariki Child, Youth and Family, New Zealand Family Court abuses, which have, you know, now we've had the Ombudsman report, which came out with the good work that Jean DeHuya and Janet Mason and those people did with stopping the the uplifts in Hastings. We've got the Ombudsman report which came out and said that Oranga Tamariki broke domestic and international law. We've had the report by Oranga Tamariki, which was pretty scathing themselves. We've got rid of Grenier Moss and Lambert's gone, and there was an interim CEO. He didn't last too long, and now there's another CEO. Let's see how long he lasts. We've had the Child Commissioner's report, which was pretty scathing, and sadly, I think that New Zealanders are not getting educated with the fact that the real history of what was going on with some of these abuses by the government were actually set in law many, many years ago, and people just don't seem to know about them. Jean DeHuya is an absolute amazing encyclopedia on what our colonial ancestors did to harm families, particularly Maori families. And then, of course, you've got the Royal Commission on Abuse in State and Faith-Based Care and all those incredible warriors that first got it off the ground. And then there's another group, the advocates, that have continued to see that roll out. Now, I know many people have got a lot of criticism about the Royal Commission, but when you look at Lake Alice, which was part of the commission, you would have to say that it was a definite cleaning out of the trough, and it definitely highlighted the incompetence, cronyism, and the criminal lawlessness of state organisations with political interference. The police, medical council, psychology board, education, child, youth, social welfare back in those days, and the political interference for people to be able to get justice, which then highlights another bigger problem, which is that the judiciary is supposed to be independent of the state. And the reason for that is that it's the interposer of the overwhelming power of the state versus the fragile rights of an individual. But what we've been seeing in this country, and it's becoming really clear, is that the judiciary is just a tool of the state. And it's been helping the state and protecting those state ministries like social welfare, like Oranga Tamariki, the New Zealand Police, through political interference. Otherwise, Lake Alice in particular would have been dealt with 50 years ago, and it wasn't. And it just showed sheer incompetence by some police. How the heck Malcolm Burgess ever got an OBE is just absolutely cronyism and out the gate to me. He went on to run the organised financial crime agency that used my kids in a domestic drug operation. The guy's a nutcase, and I say that loudly. And I say that his OBE should be withdrawn. It's time to clean out the trough within the bureaucracy of New Zealand, and they're the people who are actually harming us the most. So does that answer your question there?
So, are you saying that the New Zealand government has actually legislated domestic violence being um, pushed upon children?
Historically, yes. Historically, they did. And they haven't protected the rights of the children or the parents or the whistleblowers. You can see that quite clearly when you look at faith-based care in the Royal Commission, which hasn't even really started yet. But you can see that there is a relationship between the state and the churches. Well, we know this is in depth. 18% of the schools in New Zealand had to get bailed out in the 80s or 90s. That 18% of the schools were religious schools, still are today, where the churches now have a fee for supplying the property, and all the costs of running the schools are actually funded by the New Zealand taxpayer. So, it's wonderful rort for the churches. They're just a property developer.
Do you think that the Labor government, the current government at the moment, has helped with starting these or permitting these investigations? And do you think that these investigations would have happened under the opposition?
Okay. I'm only going to make comment with regards how well they've done in this particular area of the investigations into Oranga Tamariki. They haven't even started on the judiciary. There's other organisations, there's the Ministry of Education, etc., etc. I'm not going to get onto my view on the pro-choice argument, but I believe that without this Labor government, and I mean this one, because all the other ones before covered up things like Lake Alice and the abuses that were going on, this Labor government has been pretty unique. And you wouldn't have got it under National. They wouldn't have bothered. In fact, they were deep in it. But in saying that, I have seen emails to, the current Prime Minister of New Zealand, naming MPs that were doing things that they shouldn't have been. Some are alive, some are dead. And I imagine that's going to eventually come out as well. As to what the national MPs were doing, I don't know. But I can say, hand on heart, without the current Labor government, I don't think that any of this would have even been remotely revealed as to the part that the bureaucracy of the government plays in abusing New Zealand citizens.
So, Steve, how do you see 2022 panning out?
Right. Well, firstly, the most key thing that is going to pan out is the COVID situation, whether there is investigation done on a global basis to look at it, to see what is real, to see what isn't. That's number one. Number two, that's going to affect the economics of our countries. I was reading in The Economist that they're projecting a 5% rebound in the economies next year, but that will be dependent on what next variant comes out or doesn't come out. I think that thirdly, that governments around the world are starting to wake up to the fact that the relationship between the citizens and the governments is changing. And the citizens are wanting more say in how their countries are run, the standards which would they expect from politicians, and that politicians are there as representatives of the citizens of a country. They can't just go in and do exactly what they want to do or just follow the party line, because that's actually not what New Zealanders or people around the globe really want. And I think we're going to see there's definitely a place for a third party in New Zealand. I think that New Zealand First probably chopped their legs off over the last two elections. I don't know if they'll recover, but there definitely needs to be a balancing act between the two large parties, or the two large groups, which would be New Zealand Enact and Labour and the Greens. Whether the Maori Party can take that role as the middle ground would be interesting. But I do believe that the relationship has fundamentally changed between what the citizens want from their politicians and how they are to act and how they are to protect our interests. And you see this with the fight between the legal hierarchy of laws, where, of course, the Parliament is saying that their laws, if they put them through, override everything, where the citizens seem to me to be pushing more towards human rights being a more powerful law. And I guess that's going to really, for New Zealand, is really going to push an agenda towards a constitution of some sort.
How do you think Families for Justice has performed over the last 4 years?
Well, it's very difficult working with broken people. I've found it, some days you can have them all on board and some days you can't. But we're a voice for trying to get justice for victims of the state across the board. I think the best thing we ever did was unite with a group called United and tried to pull all the groups together. We said, look, we don't mind what brand you come as long as you come. And I think Jean Tahuya was quite pivotal in that, and Tutanamu and other groups, because you have to have mass to be able to have a voice in the din of the crowd. I just find that it's very difficult to get people to work together because everybody wants to be the boss. Personally, I don't want to be the boss. I'm happy to work with anyone, and most of our people are. And I know, talking to some of the other group leaders out there who run some of the social media Facebooks, that we are trying to work together in a united way to be able to make change. I know that for us next year, we're doing a lot of work with regards the select committee stuff, like the independence of Oranga Tamariki, because, the complaints department within Oranga Tamariki is a jack-up. Stephen Groom, who was one of the architects, the guy, I'd hate to tell you what I really think should be happening there, but it's got to become independent, because it's just a jack-up. There's no other word for it, and that's just unlawful. And that's just covering up the abuse of the state, which has been going on for, an extremely long time. And we've seen that, it happened long before Lake Alice, and that's 55 years. So I think also getting rid of Grenier Moss was a major change. Lambert was lucky, he did a runner as quickly as he could. I mean, it's a tough job, I'm sure, being the boss of Oranga Tamariki. I almost don't think there should be one head anymore. I think it should actually be run by a committee. Calvin's a bit slow in taking action. He's taking steps, not all the steps that I'd agree with, but he doesn't want to talk to me. I think we will have to target some of our work in the new year to bring it to the fore. I was very pleased to see that media started to get on board with all the stories that were coming out about, the likes of Oranga Tamariki, Lake Alice, which had been covered up for just an enormous amount of time. And that's probably the best thing that happened with regards to advising our citizens that we're not conspiracy theorists. This is actually real.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us today, Steve. Really appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
Kia ora.
Pleasure. Cheers.